And whenever we do anything, we kind of just make sure there are successes that we can see, and we celebrate those successes. So I think that's pretty much it, to be honest with you. A lot of it is in the thinking in terms of my contribution. It's hearing the problems, coming up with creative solutions to them, and hearing back from them whether they think that will work or not, and then working through the implementation with them. Like, how did you do it? What happened last time? What was the hold up? Who was slowing you down? What did that conversation sound like? Let's workshop it. Give me a draft of this email. What time is that meant to be there? I'm going to be calling them up to make sure they're or I might find someone who's on the ground. I've got family and friends back home, and I say, can you swing by this place where they're meant to be doing this right now, but I need someone else on the ground to make sure that's been happening. And then they'll go there and they'll send me pictures or whatever I need, just to make sure things are moving on smoothly.
All right. Thank you for that. All right. Looking at the development, or maybe the type of, looking at the type of development that we have or we should have in Africa,
Mm.
and how do you see the role of social entrepreneurs like yours, maybe by people of African descent, or maybe by because it doesn't mean that you must be in the diaspora before you can do this kind of project. So I'm trying to see uh, the importance of this kind of project in our social development in Africa. What do you have to say about that?
I think social entrepreneurs, I think, are really necessary in Africa as a whole. I think there's a lot of opportunity. It's one of the fastest growing economies. We have trade unions happening. There's all kinds of movements, and I think most of the statistics would probably tell you that if you look forward, especially with our young people, like I feel like in terms of our population growth, if we can access or empower those young people to be ready for the world that's going to be in the next generation, for example, we as Africans can really shift where we are on the global scale. I genuinely believe that. And I think that's going to come from people who are thinking about Africa in its potential, as well as its present. It would make no sense to go there and say, oh, we could be this, that, and the other if we're not also dealing with what's happening on the ground at the moment. I think there's also room though for just plain entrepreneurs who are going to be creating jobs, who are going to be solving the infrastructure issues. Like, for example, in Sierra Leone, one of the things I've seen that is a problem is that, whether it's energy or infrastructure, we are not in a position yet to be manufacturing our own goods. So we send out all our raw materials and then buy them back manufactured and produced at a higher premium, which doesn't make sense to me. But until we solve that problem, our economies continue to plummet. And I think when it comes to social entrepreneurs, it takes people who will think to themselves, okay, we have the problem, which is on a huge scale, but it's also an opportunity. One, because we can solve this problem and have the knock-on effect later on. But two, creating a factory to do this will create hundreds of jobs, for example. And that, for me, is an example of a social entrepreneur who's looking at the problem, creating a solution that creates capital flow, but is also creating a solution that creates capital flow that has positive social impact on the local communities. One of the things that inspired me about this thinking was a place called Watoto in Uganda. And I mean, it has its own issues, but one of the things I found that was really interesting is their circle economy they had with their projects. So they would take young people from who had lost their parents and parents who had lost their children, and they'll put them together and create families. And those children would go to school and they would be educated and they would learn trades as they go through. And then at the end, if their trade was, for example, IT, then they will be part of the internet and the marketing for the actual Watoto organization. If they were to go into farming, they would farm the food that is consumed within the community. If they went into textiles, they would create the clothes that would be, worn by the children within the community, all that kind of stuff. Everything went back into each other. And I really liked it. And I was like, I looked at it as a way of creating that positive impact for the local communities, but also creating capital, because those people then went on to provide services on a corporate level. And that completely changed the economic ecosystem within that community.
That's so interesting. That's so interesting. I really love that. All
Mm.
right. Because of time constraint and also because the internet is not really the best today, could you share with me what would be your final thought here? And please remember to add, how can people reach you?
Okay, so my final thoughts are we just need intention. We need to get rid of the victim mentality, the savior mentality. And I think we as Africans in the diaspora, for example, are no exception to this. One of the things that I went to Soweto in South Africa, and I was there with a group of other Black people, and the reaction we got was surprise, because they hadn't seen a group of young Black people who would go to a place like that. They said they found that the people who did have money from the West would go to Cape Town and then flaunt it, and they'll go out and do all this stuff. But then if people like us aren't doing the work and we're not connecting, then we can't really complain when the wrong people do that and then capitalize off it. So for me, it's about us standing in the gap, being the ones to solve it for ourselves, and also creating things that are going to be scalable, so that in the next generation of time, we will start to reverse the effect that the last few hundred years has had on us.
All right. Thank you so much, Andre. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, no problem at all. It's been a pleasure.